Hey everyone, this is Karenology. You won't believe the insane drama that just unfolded. Let's get into it.
The metal box hit the ground with a hollow clang that echoed through my garage like a funeral bell. Inside, yellow documents scattered across the concrete floor. Court transcripts, evidence photos, and a handwritten confession that made my blood freeze. 20 years I'd carried the weight of my brother Danny's death in that state prison. 20 years of believing he deserved what he got. Now I was staring at proof that Judge Mortimer knew Danny was innocent all along. Let me back up. 3 weeks ago, I was just Michael Harris, 54 years old, fixing pipes and trying to forget the past. Then the lawyer showed up at my door with news that changed everything. Judge Mortimer, the man who destroyed my family, had died and left me his house across the street. But there was a catch. I had to care for his dog, a massive rottweiler named Atlas, who looked like he could tear through a car door. The inheritance seemed like some twisted joke at first. Why would the judge who sent my innocent brother to die behind bars leave me anything? But standing in that garage, holding Danny's real alibi statement that Mortimer had buried, I understood. This wasn't generosity. This was guilt trying to buy its way into heaven. You can't be serious about keeping that monster. Karen Blake's voice cut through my thoughts like fingernails on glass. She stood in my driveway, arms crossed, her designer jacket pulled tight against the October wind. Everything about her screamed money and entitlement, from her perfectly styled blonde hair to her leather boots that probably cost more than I made in a month. Uncle Mortimer was clearly suffering from dementia when he wrote that ridiculous will. Atlas growled low from where he sat beside me, 120 pounds of black muscle and loyalty. The dog had been wary of everyone since the judge died, but something about Karen set him on edge. Smart dog. The will is legally binding, I said, not bothering to hide my irritation. Your uncle made his choice. Karen's laugh was sharp and cold. My uncle was manipulated by a vindictive man seeking revenge. Everyone knows about your brother's criminal history. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of an old newspaper article. Drug dealer dies in prison fight. That's your family legacy, isn't it, Michael? The words hit like a physical blow, but I'd learned long ago not to let people like Karen see me bleed. Danny wasn't a dealer, he was set up. Of course he was. Her voice dripped with mock sympathy. They all are, according to their families. But the evidence was clear, the trial was fair, and justice was served. Uncle Mortimer was a respected judge who never made mistakes. If only she knew what I'd found in that metal box. But something told me to keep quiet, to let her show her true colors first. Karen wasn't just fighting for the house. She was protecting her uncle's reputation, and by extension, her own family name. I've already spoken with my attorney, she continued, stepping closer. Atlas's growl deepened, and she quickly stepped back. We're filing a motion to have the will overturned on grounds of undue influence and mental incompetence. No reasonable person would leave their estate to the brother of a convicted criminal. And no reasonable person would try to steal a dead man's final wishes, I shot back. But here we are. Her face flushed red with anger. That animal is dangerous. Look at him. He's practically feral. I've documented 3 incidents already where he's shown aggressive behavior toward neighborhood children. Documented how? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Video evidence, witness statements, medical evaluations. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd seen since winter. I've done my homework, Michael. That dog will be put down for public safety, and this house will go to its rightful heir, me. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the asphalt like a countdown timer. Karen Blake thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She had no idea that her beloved uncle had left me more than just a house and a dog. He'd left me the truth. That night, I sat in Mortimer's old study, Atlas at my feet, reading through document after document. The corruption ran deep. Bribes from prosecutors, evidence tampering, witness intimidation. Danny's case was just one of dozens where Mortimer had perverted justice for money. But Danny's was special. It was the one that haunted the old judge's dreams. The confession letter was dated just 3 months before Mortimer's death. In it, he admitted to taking $50,000 to ensure Danny's conviction. The real killer, a connected businessman's son, walked free while my 19-year-old brother rotted in a cell. Mortimer knew Danny would likely die in prison, young, small, with no gang protection. He'd signed my brother's death warrant with his gavel. My hands shook as I read the final paragraph. I leave my house to Michael Harris not as restitution. Nothing can bring back his brother, but as acknowledgement of my sins. Perhaps caring for Atlas will teach him something about loyalty and forgiveness, qualities I never possessed. The truth is in the garden. Let it finally see sunlight. The garden. I looked out the window at the neat rows of roses Mortimer had tended religiously. Tomorrow I'd dig, but tonight I had to figure out how to handle Karen. She thought she was fighting for family honor, but she was really protecting a legacy built on corruption and murder. Atlas lifted his massive head and looked at me with eyes that seemed almost human. This dog had been Mortimer's only companion in his final years, the only witness to his guilt and shame. Now he was mine, and Karen wanted him dead. I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight Karen in court with lawyers and legal briefs. I was going to let her dig her own grave, just like her uncle had dug Danny's. The truth would come out, but not the way anyone expected. The documents went back in the box went in my safe, and I went to bed with a plan forming in my mind. Karen Blake wanted a war over a dead man's wishes. She was about to get one, but not the kind she was expecting. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about justice delayed, but not denied. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the house that now belonged to me. Atlas settled beside my bed with a heavy sigh, as if he too understood that everything was about to change. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The first shovel of dirt came up black and rich, smelling of old secrets and rain. I'd been digging for an hour behind Mortimer's prize-winning roses when Atlas started pawing at a particular spot, whining in that low way dogs do when they know something humans don't. The metal detector I'd borrowed from my neighbor Jim had been screaming for 10 minutes straight. 3 feet down, my shovel hit something hard, not rock, metal, a larger box wrapped in plastic and sealed with enough tape to survive a flood. Inside, I found what Mortimer meant by the truth. Audio recordings, dozens of them, dating back 15 years. Conversations between the judge and prosecutors, defense attorneys, even a few cops. All of them talking money, all of them selling justice to the highest bidder. Danny's voice was on one of the tapes, young, scared, begging his court-appointed lawyer to present the alibi witness who could prove his innocence. The lawyer's response made my stomach turn. "Kid, your witness is a homeless junkie. Judge Mortimer won't buy that story, and neither will a jury. Take the plea deal. 5 years is better than life." But Danny refused. He believed in the system, believed truth would win out. Poor kid never had a chance. Finding buried treasure? Karen's voice made me spin around. She stood at the garden gate with 2 men in expensive suits. Lawyers, by the look of them. Atlas was immediately on his feet, positioning himself between me and the visitors. "Just doing some landscaping," I said, casually stepping in front of the open box. "Something wrong with that?" "Everything's wrong with it," she snapped. "You're destroying my uncle's garden, and that animal is clearly agitated. This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior I've been documenting." One of the lawyers stepped forward, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Harris, I'm Robert Chen, representing Ms. Blake. We're here to serve you with a temporary restraining order regarding the dog and notice of our petition to invalidate the will." He handed me a stack of papers thick enough to choke on. The restraining order required Atlas to be muzzled and leashed at all times, prohibited him from approaching within 50 feet of any neighboring property, and scheduled a behavioral evaluation with a court-appointed animal expert. "This is harassment," I said, but Chen was already talking over me. Furthermore, we have evidence that the testator, Judge Mortimer Blake, was suffering from severe cognitive decline at the time the will was executed. Medical records show he was prescribed medication for early-stage dementia. That was news to me. I'd seen Mortimer around town just months before his death, and he'd seemed sharp as ever. Mean, but sharp. Karen pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was Atlas in my backyard, barking at something off camera. The footage was edited to make him look vicious, all snarling teeth and aggressive posturing. 3 neighbors have filed complaints about threatening behavior. Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter was so traumatized she won't walk past your house anymore. I knew Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter. She was 16 and more afraid of homework than any dog. But the video looked damning, especially with the ominous music Karen had added to it. You've got 24 hours to comply with the restraining order, Chen continued. Failure to do so will result in the immediate removal of the animal. They left me standing in the garden with a box full of evidence and a legal noose tightening around my neck. Atlas sensed my frustration and pressed against my leg, offering what comfort he could. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I might be losing. That evening, I called my own lawyer, Pete Rodriguez, a guy I'd known since high school who handled mostly divorce cases and DUI defenses. His assessment wasn't encouraging. Mike, they've got a solid case for the will contest, he said over the phone. Medical records showing dementia, your brother's criminal history creating apparent motive for revenge, and now animal control complaints. Add in Karen being the only living relative, and a judge might see this as correcting an obvious injustice. What about the recordings I found? What recordings? Pete's voice got careful. You didn't tell me about any recordings. I realized my mistake. If those tapes came to light now, they'd look like fabricated evidence, especially coming from the brother of one of Mortimer's convicted defendants. Worse, they implicated dozens of people who were still alive, still powerful. Going public with them would be like painting a target on my back. Never mind, I said. What are my options? Honestly, your best bet might be to negotiate. Maybe Karen would be willing to let you keep the dog if you give up the house. But I knew Karen better than Pete did. She didn't want to negotiate. She wanted to win. Complete and total victory, with me humiliated and Atlas dead. The house was just the beginning. The next morning brought worse news. I found Atlas in the backyard, stumbling and disoriented. Someone had thrown something over the fence, chunks of meat laced with sedatives. Not enough to kill him, just enough to make him appear unstable and aggressive when the court-appointed evaluator arrived that afternoon. Dr. Sarah Martinez looked like she'd rather be anywhere else as she watched Atlas struggle to stay upright. The sedatives were wearing off, but slowly, and every stumble, every confused whine went into her report. I'm seeing signs of neurological issues, she murmured, making notes on her tablet. Possible brain trauma or genetic disorders. Without extensive testing, I can't rule out the potential for unpredictable violent behavior. He was drugged, I said. Someone threw poisoned meat over my fence. Dr. Martinez looked at me with the kind of patient sympathy reserved for conspiracy theorists and grief-stricken pet owners. Mr. Harris, I understand this is difficult, but denial won't help your dog. These symptoms suggest serious underlying problems that could make him dangerous to the community. I wanted to grab her tablet and show her the timeline, how Atlas had been perfectly fine until this morning, how the aggressive behavior started right after Karen filed her complaints. But I could see it in her eyes. She'd already made up her mind. That afternoon, Karen appeared at my door with a sheriff's deputy and an animal control officer. She was practically glowing with triumph. The evaluation confirms what we've been saying all along, she announced loud enough for the neighbors to hear. That animal is a public menace. The court has ordered his immediate removal pending a final hearing. The deputy looked uncomfortable, but determined. I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. I've got a court order here. The dog needs to come with us. Atlas was still groggy from the sedatives, barely able to stand. As they led him away in a specialized transport cage, he looked back at me with confused, trusting eyes. It was the same look Danny had given me the last time I visited him in prison, 3 days before he died. Karen waited until the vehicles disappeared around the corner before turning back to me. "You brought this on yourself, Michael. My uncle was a good man who made one moment of weakness in his final days. I'm simply correcting his mistake." "Your uncle was a monster," I said quietly, "and you're just like him." She laughed, actually laughed. "Coming from the brother of a dead drug dealer, that's almost funny. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. My attorneys will be filing for immediate possession of the property." As she walked away, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Danny's death. Complete, overwhelming despair. Karen had outplayed me at every turn. She had the law, the money, the connections, and the moral high ground. All I had were recordings that would destroy my credibility if I used them, and a truth that no one would believe. But as I stood there in the empty yard, looking at the disturbed earth where I'd found Mortimer's secret shame, I realized something important. Karen didn't know about the recordings. She was fighting to protect her uncle's reputation from what she thought was simple revenge, not realizing she was defending a legacy built on corruption and murder. That gave me an advantage she couldn't see coming. Karen Blake wanted to bury the past and claim her inheritance. But some graves once opened refused to stay closed. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The courthouse steps were slippery with morning rain when I arrived for the final hearing. Karen stood near the entrance surrounded by her legal team, looking like she'd already won. She probably had. In the eyes of the law, I was just a bitter man trying to steal a dead judge's estate through manipulation and lies. But I wasn't there to fight her in court anymore. Inside the courtroom, I sat quietly as Karen's lawyers painted me as a vengeful opportunist who'd exploited a senile old man's guilt. They had medical records, witness testimony, and that damning video of Atlas looking vicious. My own lawyer, Pete, did his best, but we both knew it was hopeless. "Your Honor," Karen said when called to testify, "my uncle was a pillar of this community for 30 years. He dedicated his life to justice and fairness. This man's attempt to exploit Uncle Mortimer's final moments of confusion is an insult to his memory and everything he stood for." I watched her perform, so sincere, so righteous. She genuinely believed every word she was saying. That's what made what came next so devastating. During the lunch recess, I followed Karen to the small café across from the courthouse. She was sitting alone, reviewing notes for the afternoon session, when I slid into the booth across from her. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "There's nothing to discuss," she replied without looking up. "By tonight, you'll be a trespasser in my house." I placed a small digital recorder on the table between us and pressed play. Danny's young voice filled the air, scared and desperate, begging his lawyer to present the alibi witness who could prove his innocence. Then came the lawyer's response, cold and calculating, talking about plea deals and Judge Mortimer's preferences. Karen's face went white. "Where did you get this?" "Your uncle left me more than just a house and a dog," I said. "He left me the truth about what he really was." I played another recording, Mortimer himself, discussing payment arrangements with a prosecutor. Then another and another. Karen's hands began to shake as she realized what she was hearing. Her beloved uncle, the pillar of justice, selling verdicts like a used car salesman. "This is fake," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "There are 47 recordings, Karen. Medical records showing your uncle was perfectly lucid right up until his death. Bank records showing deposits that coincide with controversial cases. And sworn statements from 3 witnesses who were paid to lie under oath." Karen stared at the recorder like it might bite her. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand who you've been defending," I said. "Your uncle didn't leave me that house out of generosity. He left it because he knew I'd eventually find these recordings. He wanted the truth to come out, but he was too much of a coward to do it himself. "So you're going to blackmail me?" Her voice was barely audible. "No, I'm going to give you a choice." I leaned forward, looking her directly in the eyes. "You can withdraw your petition, let me keep the house and get Atlas back, and I'll keep these recordings private. Your uncle's reputation stays intact, your family name remains clean, and you walk away with your inheritance from his other properties." Karen's breathing was shallow, rapid. "And if I refuse?" "Then tomorrow morning, copies of these recordings go to the State Attorney General, the FBI, the newspapers, and every family of every person your uncle wrongfully convicted. Your uncle's cases will be reviewed, his verdicts overturned, and his corruption will be front-page news for months. The Blake family name will be synonymous with judicial corruption for generations." I could see her mind working, calculating the damage. Karen was many things: greedy, entitled, ruthless. But she wasn't stupid. She knew what this would mean for her law practice, her social standing, her family's legacy. "You're just like him," she said finally, "using people's secrets against them." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I'm using them for justice, not profit. Your uncle took bribes to send innocent people to prison. I'm offering you a chance to do the right thing voluntarily." Karen closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, something had changed. The righteous anger was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "I need guarantees," she said. "Legal documents ensuring your silence." "No deals," I replied. "Just your word against mine. But remember, I'm not the one with something to hide anymore." That afternoon, Karen's lawyers filed a motion to withdraw all petitions related to Judge Mortimer's estate. She told the court that new evidence had convinced her to honor her uncle's final wishes. The judge looked surprised, but accepted the withdrawal. 3 hours later, I was at the animal shelter, signing papers to reclaim Atlas. The big dog nearly knocked me down when he saw me, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. He was thinner, more anxious, but alive and whole. That evening, I sat on the porch of my inherited house, Atlas at my feet, watching Karen load boxes into a moving truck across the street. She was leaving town, abandoning her practice and her old life. Maybe she'd find peace somewhere else, or maybe she'd just find new ways to profit from other people's misery. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The recordings were in my safe, along with Mortimer's confession letter. I'd meant what I told Karen. I wouldn't use them unless I had to. The dead judge's sins would stay buried with him. But if anyone else tried to hurt me or Atlas, if Karen changed her mind, or if any of Mortimer's other victims needed proof of their innocence, the truth would be waiting. Atlas looked up at me with those deep, intelligent eyes, and I scratched behind his ears. "Just you and me now, boy," I said. "Think we can handle that?" His tail thumped against the porch boards, and I took that as a yes. The truth about Danny would never bring him back, would never give me the 20 years I'd spent blaming him instead of the system that failed him. But at least now I knew my brother died innocent, and that knowledge had given me something I thought I'd lost forever, the ability to trust in justice, even when it came slowly and at great cost. Karen Blake had wanted to bury the past and claim her inheritance. Instead, she'd learned that some legacies are too toxic to embrace. Sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to acknowledge their sins and try to do better. As the sun set over the small town that had been home to so much pain and corruption, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Peace. Not the peace of victory or revenge, but the deeper peace that comes from finally knowing the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. Atlas stretched out beside me, already settling into our new life together. Tomorrow, I'd start renovating this house, making it truly mine instead of just inherited. But tonight, I was content to sit with my dog and watch the stars come out over a world that, for once, felt like it might actually be fair. The war was over, the truth had won, and sometimes that's enough.